You're committed now. You're on your horse, true and trustworthy, one of the fastest, one of the most endurable, the most unexpected, yet direct. And you've just figged him. So you're riding your steed as you've ridden for the past 1,000 pages, and you think you know where you're going to end up, but you really only know the direction. The mountains on the horizon are just shrinking, and the endless plains ahead are just like eating them up. You've charged through every obstacle, you've flattened them or you brushed them aside, and never once have you felt fear. Total trust, total surrender. As I said, you're committed now, and the mountains are gone. It's just sky and golden plains, and the dividing line between them is sinking. It's like the blue eating the gold, and your horse is allied with the sky. He accelerates, as does the sky, and they close in on the gold like a pincer. And when the mouth shuts, there's nothing. You've leapt, and there's nothing beneath you. Falling as you only know how to fall, reading as you only know how to read. And it's never been better. Shogun Volume 2, a no-spoiler review. Admittedly, the sense of accomplishment of like finishing a book adds to how I feel about the book, right? And what contributes to that is scale. You know, it could be the scale of the story, like how many years or generations does it span? Is it set during great events like a war, a famine, or a revolution in culture, society, technology? It could also just simply be the length of the book. And Shogun is a big book as well as all of those other things. So it feels like such an accomplishment to finish it. And that makes me feel good. So I just want to caveat everything I'm about to say with the simple fact that finishing James Clavell's Shogun felt like an accomplishment and made me feel amazing. And I loved it. And it's a great book. Shogun is epic, literally and colloquially. It's amazing, also beautiful, thought-provoking, gripping. I'll give it all of the superlatives, okay? What it does, though, that I was particularly moved by, because how did James Clavell even think of that? How did he even pull it off? What I was particularly moved by is how the story of Shogun, the outside, like the packaging, how it's presented, is a reflection of the worldview the protagonist is getting to grips with. You know, what actually happens on the inside of the story. And it's kind of meta and self-referential like that. The story of Shogun, this happens and then that happens, and a lot happens, okay? It doesn't stop. Like literally with 5 pages left, I was like, this is relentless. How is it gonna end? The story of Shogun is a reflection of what the main thrust of the story is about, the point of the story, if there even is one. So, to recap, it's the 1600s and the protagonist arrives in Japan. The protagonist has only ever known a Christian world. And I covered this more in my Volume 1 video, but in broad strokes, okay? The dominant cultures in Europe and the Middle East, whatever they called it back then, the main cultures there are directed by their religions. And broadly speaking, all of their religions are derived from like Western Judeo-Christian monotheism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, right? Broadly speaking, the main difference between them is a question of who is Jesus? Is he actually the Son of God? Is he a prophet? Another difference is also in the question of how to worship the one and only true God. Because ultimately, the God in question is still the same God, right? And even within that umbrella of Christianity, let's just take Protestantism and Catholicism. All politics aside, one of the main differences there is the issue of transubstantiation. Catholics believe that the bread and wine during communion is literally transformed into the blood and body of Christ, whereas Protestants believe that it's just symbolic. Anyway, all of that is just to say that in that world, in the Judeo-Christian Western theology-derived culture world, the enemy or that which is most different to you. And so because of that, you consider it a threat, the Catholic to your Muslim, well, the enemy is still pretty fucking similar to you, right? Of course, obviously we can only say this with hindsight, because when actually in that world as a Catholic, I imagine, all politics aside, a Protestant would be so different. And so imagine now how foreign and different a Muslim is to a Catholic. And if that's how different a Muslim is, imagine John Blackthorne, protagonist, from that world, discovers a whole world, Japan, where there wasn't 1600 years of infighting about Jesus' relation to God. In fact, for 1500 years or so, the Japanese had no idea who Jesus was. But so what, I hear you ask? Why is that important? Well, let's be very reductive here. In the Judeo-Christian Western theological worldview, whether you're a Muslim or Jewish or a Christian, the point of life, the one we're living in right now, like the one we're alive in, the point of life is to get into heaven, or at the very least, avoid going to hell, end up in purgatory. But the point of life is reward and punishment. And therefore, we just don't do certain things. And we actually do some other things regularly, like mass, prayers, charity. Like how the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not kill. Pretty simple. So I won't kill because I want to go to heaven, so I just don't do it. And people who do it, people who do kill, are bad because clearly they don't care about going to hell. And I'm kind of, if I'm being honest, afraid of them. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't break the harmony of the tribe, of the village, of society, of family. And that feeling that makes you want to do it, well, that must be bad also then, because horny, bad. I won't destroy the peace of the village or betray the trust of my wife, so I'll make sure that when I do it, if I do it, because there's also vows of celibacy, I only do it with my wife and for a greater purpose than simply enjoyment, because enjoyment is just horny, good. We'll do it for procreation. But what's interesting about the psychology of this kind of worldview is that there is a purpose to every action, and that the purpose is directed from the outside in, okay? i.e., I want to go to heaven or I don't want to go to hell. And it's not generated from within. Like, if I were to ask you, how come you didn't kill that guy? You might answer, well, I didn't want to. And if I said, well, why didn't you want to? You might say, because killing is wrong. And if I said, well, why is killing wrong? You might say, well, because of heaven and hell. Playing that causal why game in that day and age, 1600s, you will always end up at God, or Aristotle's and then later Thomas Aquinas's prime mover, that which moves yet is itself unmoved. The first ever uncaused cause. Nowadays, if we were to play that causal why game, we'd probably end up at the Big Bang, but that's a whole other can of worms, okay? But this idea that certain states of being alive, the states of like happiness and suffering, the idea that they persist for eternity in the form of heaven and hell after this life, well, that's pretty unsettling, to put it mildly. It's as though this life is like an audition for heaven and hell. It gives significance to what we do while we're alive in this life, because if we fuck up, the punishment is so bad. But on the other hand, if we get it right, the upside is eternal bliss. But that reward and punishment is being meted out by God, a being we cannot, by definition, know. And also that judgment coming from God, it's coming from the outside, right? Because God is judging me. It's outside in. The motivation comes from out there. So at this point, there are 2 points I want to make here. Given that the consequences to our actions are so severe, i.e., eternal damnation or eternal bliss, one, how would I know what I'm doing is the right thing. God is the only one who will judge me ultimately, right? But how can I possibly know the mind of God? Especially when Protestants exist alongside Catholics, who exist alongside Jews, who exist alongside Muslims. Like, if I were that person, I would be living with like a low-key ambient fear and vigilance pervading my entire life for my entire lifetime. Like, I just don't want to mess up this audition, right? And it's not just on the level of, am I doing the right thing? But it's also on the level of, why is what they are doing not the right thing? And two, therefore, the strength of my conviction in everything that I do and believe, given that I can't know the mind of God, and God is ultimately the guy who judges, right? And there are those who believe in other things and other gods. The strength of my conviction has to be immense. Or fuck, like I just crumble in fear, right? The strength of my belief that God exists, that my God exists and not others, has to be super strong. It's self-fulfilling, because the more I want heaven and the more I don't want hell, the more I have to believe what it is I believe in. And all of that is caused from the outside in, from wanting heaven and not wanting hell. It's caused by God, because after this life, I want heaven and I don't want to go to hell. And this sort of thinking, this doing something in order for something else kind of thinking, well, it kind of still persists today, doesn't it? Well, at least for me, it does. Even in this very secular society, in order to get fit, in order to lose weight, in order to make money, to meet a partner, to get promoted, to be respected, to be heard, to be seen, to learn, to contribute, to give back, to whatever. They are all in order twos. And probably it's all part of human nature, but like, it's chicken and egg, right? How much of it is actually human nature when we've had more than 2,000 years of it jammed down our throats? And tangentially, in response to this, we're seeing the rise of people talking about doing things for their own sake, right? Which, it's kind of ironic, because meditation, deep breathing, gratitude journals, all are exercises in watching rocks grow in and of themselves, but they are applied in order to have peace of mind. Anyway, now take Japan. 1600s, and we're still being very reductive here. No 10 Commandments, no heaven and hell, no Jesus, no eternally persisting states of pain or pleasure that come after this life. It's just this life. And pain and pleasure are simply part of this life, part of being alive. Without pain and pleasure, there would be no life. I mean, would you call it a life with all of its richness of experience if all you felt was pleasure? Or if you couldn't feel neither pain nor pleasure? Likewise, pain and pleasure could not be felt if you weren't here alive to feel it. Does a tree make a sound if it falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it? Yeah, but sound waves. But who is there perceiving them is really the point, right? And pleasure could not even be known, let alone be appreciated, if it weren't for pain, or vice versa, if you're a masochist. And like this life, pain and pleasure will pass, and that's it. There's no significance to it, no significance to life, or pain or pleasure, or anything. Without judgment from the outside in, there's no significance to things intrinsically, because, I mean, ultimately, this is not an audition for heaven and hell. This is the real thing. It's happening right now. And the only significance is what we attach to our actions or their actions or what they said or events or moments. And that, the significance we attach, well, that's ephemeral, because we're ephemeral. Like, all things are just ephemeral. They're here one moment and they're gone the next. And there's nothing from the outside coming in to tell us what to do, how we should live our lives, to tell us, don't steal that apple, because it's all us. And instead of, Judeo-Christian Western monoculture, all organizing systems of thought and behavior in Japan, like, I don't know, Shinto, Buddhism, Bushido, they're all knowingly man-made. And yes, in some cases revered as though they're not, as though they're actually divine. But ultimately, I choose to follow it or not. The impetus is coming from me, from within. And they say it a lot in Shogun. They say, I am samurai. It comes from within. It is a choice. It is agency. And it's not because of some judgment in the future from some transcendental being. And I know as well, figurative first person, and I know as well that if I choose to contravene, let's say the samurai way, I'll get my head chopped off or be invited to commit seppuku, right? But like, so what? It's not like this is my one and only chance to get into heaven, right? I mean, some of us believe in reincarnation, so we'll just come back again and then we have another chance. But like I'm saying, if my life ends, that's it. My life ends. That's it. Just like everything else. It's not sacred. And it's not sacred because like everything is sacred. Everything is beautiful because everything's ephemeral. And is that sad? Yeah. But sadness is fleeting. And so is me thinking that sadness is sad and thinking that sadness is sad and it's fleeting is sad. Know it. Appreciate it. Don't avoid it. Don't fear it. It's just like everything else. It's all fleeting. We're just part of the whole. And the whole wouldn't be the whole if it weren't for us. And there's nothing else. Just the flow of things. Samsara. So, John Blackthorne's journey from European person to Japanese person is the story of Shogun, a story of enlightenment, some might say. And Shogun takes you, the reader, and it certainly took me, on this journey. His flow from being someone from that Christian worldview, holding on to it so tightly as he is only naturally doing, to getting and understanding and becoming someone of that Japanese worldview. And yeah, a lot happens. Like I said, I was blown away by how literally on every page, something else happens. For 1,100 pages, it just doesn't stop. It's like life. It just doesn't stop. It just keeps on going and going and going. And it was so fun to read, so pleasurable. And it was a great ride. Something's always happening, or something's always getting resolved, or laying the foundations for something else happening. And there are like pops of catharsis here, pops of closure there, like mini climaxes here and there, mini denouements throughout. And then I had like 20 pages left and I was thinking, how the hell is all of this going to get resolved? There's only like 20 pages left. And there's still like this and this and this and this. And that's when I realized wanting everything to be resolved, packaged, and tied up with a nice little bow is the same as wanting everything I just read for the past 1,100 pages to be for something, for catharsis, for a moral to the story. And I mentioned this in my last review, the Kawakami's Heaven review, for closure. Because otherwise, if it's not for something, what's the point? Where's the happy ending? Or a sad one if it's a tragedy. There is no heaven. The story is just the story, and that's the point of the story. And that's it. No significance. It's just a really, really enjoyable ride. Anyway, subscribe. Bye. Love you.